You're listening to Flip Empire, the show committed to helping real estate entrepreneurs who want to build their empire without sacrificing their life. Your success and freedom starts now with your host, Alex Pardo.
If you are debt-free, including your mortgage, have almost no expenses, and accompany it with a high income producing skill set such as real estate, then most of your income and profit can be invested. Wealth becomes automatic, something you expect, not something you wish for. That was a direct quote by my friend Mark Lane, who is today's guest expert here on the Flip Empire Show. And guys, what a phenomenal episode. You'll hear me allude to the fact that because of his mindset, because of his approach to this business, it's very against the grain from what is commonly preached or spoken about. You know, and Mark got started in this business in 2010. 2019, built a big team, was doing 110 deals a year, overhead got to $65,000, and was netting less than 10% of that. Less than 10% of his top line revenue was what he was taking home, which was not very much relative to the headaches and the size of the team, the overhead. And today he has a completely different business. It's very simple. It's a lifestyle-based business, makes $500,000 that he actually takes home. And it's just himself and an assistant. Very simple business. And we talk about the transition. We talk about some of the lessons learned. We talk about his wealth building strategy. And there's one particular word that ties everything together. So just a ton of value packed in this episode. I really encourage you to listen to this from start to finish, because Mark just is super open, transparent, and just kind of shares all. So I know you're going to enjoy this episode with Mark Lane. I want to welcome all of you to another masterclass here on the Flip Empire Show. So it's crazy. You know, I'm super grateful and fortunate that I've been hosting this show for over 6 years. And selfishly, one of my favorite parts about doing this podcast is that I get to connect with just incredible people, number one. And secondly, people that are doing just awesome things, people I look up to. And there's so many different ways, as they say, to skin a cat. There's so many ways to make more money, amass wealth using real estate investing. And my next guest, Mr. Mark Lane, who I'm about to introduce you to, I think goes about it a different way than I believe most, and a way in which I believe is refreshing, one that aligns with my beliefs and just my perspective, the way I see things. And I think for some of you listening to the show, you might have a paradigm shift. You might have a different mindset walking away from this podcast, or at the very least, maybe challenge your belief systems, maybe challenge your way of thinking. So with that being said, Mark, man, it's awesome to finally get you on the show. I know we've been at this for a while.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks for having me. And yeah, thanks for your patience on that.
Yeah, no, not at all, man. So it's all about timing, right? But just to give people some context, you and I met, I want to say 2019, a mastermind, 2019, 20, right around there. I think it was 19, before COVID for sure. We were, I think at one point we shared a room together in a mastermind, and I heard you speak and present. And I'm like, I remember thinking to myself, like, this guy gets it, right? Because we're in a room with a bunch of type A people that are all sharing, you know, what they're doing in their business. Right. And ever since I met you, I always felt like you had just a different way to approach this business. So, man, for those people that don't know who you are or not following you on Facebook, just a little bit of a background. I already touched on it in the intro, but just quickly how you got into the business and then what your business looks like today.
Yeah, you bet. I guess my back history, I'll start of what got me into real estate and why. So going back into my work history, I've been doing real estate now this is my 12th year, just this last summer. And before getting into real estate, you know, I was working my way up at a grocery store, working my way up the store ladder, got to the point to where I was third in charge of the store, but I was working, 60 hours a week and making less than $40,000 a year. And I'm like, man, I don't really see this ever serving my family. I'm never going to be able to take care of my family the way I want to. I'm not loving it. So I left there, went to work at John Deere in the factory, working in the assembly. So very physical labor. And it was okay at first because it was different, right? Anytime we tried something different, it's like, oh, it's that newness. We're trying something different. We're busy while we're learning. But then again, after 6 months or a year, it just kind of started to wear on me, and very much physically started to wear on me. And I remember I'm always looking at the people that are ahead of me. So oftentimes that's elderly or people that are 10, 20, 30 years ahead. And so I was watching a lot of the guys there that had been there for years, decades. And they were so physically beat up. They weren't talking about the things that inspired me, and they weren't living the way that I wanted to live. And so I found myself getting kind of more depressed in a way of realizing that was going to be my life. And so I remember going home one night and, go to my bedroom. My wife at the time is, sleeping in bed with my daughter, who was probably, I think, around 2 years old. And she was, of course she was asleep. And so I'm laying next to my daughter. I'm kind of like rubbing my hands through her hair and, just looking at her. And I suddenly had a vision of her growing up to be just like I was at that moment, which was desperate, completely financially broke, not happy with my life, unfulfilled, no purpose. And I think, if it were just me, I probably would have just kept going forward and worked that job forever. But having that vision of my daughter, you as a parent, is everything. Yeah. And so that was enough just to see that pain of, this is going to be her life because she's going to follow in my footsteps. That's not okay. So I made a vow that night that I was going to change everything about our future. And I didn't know how, but it was so conviction. It was cellular, just like filled my body, filled my mind. And I woke up the next day just knowing that life was going to be different. I didn't know how yet. Obviously the opportunity hadn't presented itself yet, but I just knew at that moment because I made that conviction was so strong that I knew life was going to be different for us. So then, that kind of led down the journey. I ended up finding a book or buying a book from an infomercial, How to Be a Real Estate Millionaire or something like that. Mm-hmm. That was probably only 2 or 3 weeks later. My eyes were open at that point. I was seeking opportunities. So I found this book, bought the book, read it cover to cover. And I'm like, oh man, this kind of makes sense to me. And bought another one and another one. And I just started absorbing, really going down that rabbit hole of personal development. And that led me to a real estate seminar, which led me to, from there, it all just kind of started to spiral. So that was probably a 2-year gap between when I had that conviction versus when I did my first deal.
I want to kind of pause there because there's a few things I want to unpack before we move forward. And dude, like I shared with you before we started recording, every time I talk to you or connect with you, I find that we have more and more in common. Yeah. But the first thing I heard is that you had a strong enough why for you. That was your daughter, that was your family, that was wanting a better life. But the second thing, what I want to dig a little bit further into that I think some people that listen to the show struggle with is it sounds like for you, you hit your breaking point. And the pain of your daughter following in your footsteps up to that point was enough to say, hey, enough is enough. I'm going to wake up tomorrow. And you woke up tomorrow. I think you used the words, I felt it cellular. It was like a cellular level where you just knew things were going to be different, but you didn't know how. So many people I find are caught up and stuck on the how that they never get going or that they never gain traction. Yeah. Talk about the fact that you weren't concerned about the how, but you just knew you had a belief system. You had a vision that it was going to happen. You weren't worried about the how, but you were going to get going. Talk a little bit about that because I think that'd be helpful for a lot of people listening.
Well, if listeners haven't heard, and there's that pleasure versus pain scenario. And for me, the pain of nothing was about pleasure at that point. It was about pain. It was 100% pain. So the pain of staying put, the pain of staying in that job, the pain of continuing to be broke, the pain of seeing my daughter potentially end up in my footsteps was far greater, infinitely greater than the pain of learning something new and the trial and error that was going to come with it. So that whatever obstacles I was going to face in real estate were so insignificant at that point that it just didn't matter. I was going to plow through them. It was just, because I wanted it that bad.
I love it. So for context, you said you've been in real estate 12 years now. Do you remember more or less what year, what month it was that you woke up feeling like, hey, life is going to be different moving forward? Like more or less what time was that?
I guess what got started summer of 2010. So I don't remember day there, for whatever reason, I never put a date to it. But yeah, somewhere a couple years before that.
So when you and I met, I want to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, I want to say your business looked very different than it looks today.
Yeah.
I don't want to steal your thunder, but just quickly highlight, and then we're going to reverse engineer this process, because I want to get into your story as to why you're working less, making more with a lot less stress, overhead, and headache. But when we met, 2000, whenever it was, 18, 19, 20, what did your business look like at that point?
It was getting up there. So I'm going to step back just a little bit before that. Before we met, it was like, I was kind of one of the bigger players in my market, but there wasn't a lot going on still. That was kind of at the time where all of the foreclosures were starting to not show themselves anymore. The market, there weren't many deals to be found on the MLS, and the people that were marketing directly were kind of finding something new. Maybe they had a few years on me, but there wasn't a lot of that at that point. Okay. And so I was in a place where, even though I, was doing a fair amount, 2, 3, maybe a couple deals a month. And then that started to die down. And next thing you know, I'm starting to sell my rental properties to stay alive and to stay afloat. And so I'm like, okay, I got to figure something out. I got to figure out how to market. So it went to an event where we met, figured out how to start doing marketing, and started doing it high level immediately. So it went from basically no marketing. I maybe did some direct mail a couple times in the past, like very, very little. And so then went immediately into sending 25,000 pieces a month, plus Google ads, plus Facebook ads. And and there was nobody else really doing very much marketing in my market at that point. Yeah. So we almost instantly went up to 10 deals a month, 8 to 10 a month, almost overnight, to a point where I very quickly had to start hiring people. Yeah. So I hired, I had an assistant, and then we needed somebody to start handling sales side of it, because I was so busy handling all the acquisition. I need somebody to start selling the deals. Yeah. So that girl, she liked sales. I moved her into sales. I'm like, well, you got to help me find an assistant. Because we need somebody for that role now, which was more of like transaction coordinating, seeing the deals through, that kind of stuff, leads management. So she helped me. We found another lady. She came on board. And then next thing you know, we needed help with acquisitions. So I hired an acquisitions guy. And so we built that up. And next thing you know, we needed a general contractor. So we hired a general contractor. So we went from almost no overhead aside from myself, and then hired that assistant, which that was $4,000 a month, right? Not a big deal. We should all have an assistant. But then it jumped up to $65,000 a month in overhead. And we got up to where we were doing 110 deals. But at 110 deals at $65,000 a month in overhead, we netted that year, I think it was about $280,000.
Wow.
So other people have such similar stories. And I know people have gone so much bigger. I remember talking to a guy that was doing $3 million a year, and he had a 5 to 10% profit margin. I was like, so I thought maybe that was rare. I was going to find something new. But then the more people I started talking to that had this high volume, nobody was making money. Like, people were doing millions a year and netting $100,000. I'm like, finally, thankfully, like my business kind of came crashing down, and it just reset itself, and we got back to where we are now.
Man, our stories continue to parallel in so many ways. When I joined this particular group, very similar. So I didn't get to quite the 65,000 a month in overhead, but I was between 40 and 50,000, and I didn't get to 110 deals a year. But very similarly, I realized at one point when I started to unwind the business in 2020, I was like, I was making more the first couple of years in this business when I was a one-man show than I did with a team of 9 people. Yep. And I had close to $50,000 in overhead. Yep. And by the way, I was having more fun back then than I was having now. Yep. Why do you think that is? Because there's so many people in our circle that subscribe to the mentality that scale, scale, scale. It's a word that's so overused, and I think it's used irresponsibly, in my opinion. Yeah. Bigger is better. Beating their chest about the fact that they're doing 10 plus deals a month. Talk about where people go wrong when they have a desire. And by the way, I want people to hear me loud and clear. There's nothing wrong with scaling and going bigger.
Yeah.
but do it responsibly. Can you talk a little bit about where they fall into the trap? Because I fell into that trap, you fell into that trap, and many others.
I think one of the reasons it gets so hard to scale in this industry is because you can't hire basic intelligent people. Like you have to hire people that are relatively intelligent, and that comes with a price tag. And so, our deal size goes from, what happened to us is it went from $15,000 to $20,000 wholesales down to our average per deal was $4,000. So you think of how many deals you have to do just to cover your monthly overhead.
Yeah.
And pretty soon it's like, man, like we're just burning smoke here. But I think the reason people just see the money, right? Like I've had this conversation with so many people, some of the people that follow me on my Facebook page. People get started like we did. They get started to change the direction for their family. They get started to have more free time, to not have to go to a job, to have more independence, more control over their life. Very few people, I don't think I've talked to a single person yet that gets into it to be filthy rich. But then somewhere that disconnect happens and the money changes, right? It goes from, we might be an earner of, like for me, I was making $40,000 a year. And next thing I know, 2 years later, I'm at 200,000. And I start to hear people doing, and I was only doing a couple deals a month. I start hearing people doing 10 deals a month. I'm like, what can I make if I do 10 deals a month? Okay, make a couple $1 million a year. And so you just start to see that opportunity. Yeah. But nobody shares their net numbers. So nobody talks about, oh yeah, like this is what I'm making net, and this is how many employees I have to manage, and this is how hectic my life is now, and this is how many hours I'm working. Nobody tells that part of it, unfortunately.
And it's so true, man. People are always bloviating about the top line number, but that doesn't matter. So it's a different person, but I can think of somebody I had a conversation with about a year or so ago. They were doing roughly $3.5 million. And it's interesting, your 10% net numbers right on point. They were a little bit less. They were taking home about 300 grand. And they were, what they told me, to use their words, they were babysitting their team. Yeah. They were constantly putting out fires. And in fact, this gentleman told me, he's like, I feel like a firefighter at times at the office, and I have all this overhead. And he's like, I'm just going to unwind this thing. I'm going to scale it back because I believe I could actually have more fulfillment, have more fun, make more money, and work less. So to use that as a jumping off point, you mentioned before we got started, where are you at today?
So we just got our 2021 taxes done, and we netted a little bit over 400 for last year. And then this year it's already over 500, and we still have several sales coming in. So I would just say we're kind of hovering around that $500,000 mark.
Yeah, good for you, man. Congratulations. And this is with you, and I think you mentioned one assistant?
Yeah, just one assistant. It's my stepdaughter. She just passed her second year with me, so she's relatively new, bumping her up to $50,000 a year. So I've got one assistant making $50,000 a year, and we still do marketing. So, but that's it. And so now, there's no fighting in the office. There's no drama. There's none of that stuff. It's just very easy. Like I'm probably too lax when it comes to a boss. I just as long as the work's getting done, then that's all I care about. I don't try to dictate her vacation days or anything like that.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that should be acknowledged is real estate is a skill set. And when you have that skill set, you can make a lot of money with it. But when you try to turn a skill set into a scalable business, things can shift pretty easily.
Yeah. So I'm going to follow up with a few questions based on where your business is today, but I think it's important. So when you talk about skill sets, what would you say are the top couple of skill sets that people should really focus on developing, skill sets people should focus on sharpening that can really help them regardless of whether they want to grow and scale a business with a bunch of employees and team members, or they want a very simple lifestyle-based business the way that you have?
So coming to real estate, I'm first I'll say, wholesaling and flipping. I think wholesaling, because with wholesaling, you just develop the art of buying and selling. And that's really all it is. Two, with that, you develop negotiating, you develop sales, and ideally, like the marketing that most people do is very basic marketing. But if you really dig in, like what I'm starting to say now is really starting to understand marketing, and you start to develop some of those, that, kind of like the nuts and bolts of what you actually do that you don't even realize that you do. So sales alone, marketing alone, negotiating alone, all those are powerful skills in their own right. And then you tie them all to something such as flipping houses, wholesaling houses.
Yeah. And to piggyback on what you're sharing, to me, sales, marketing, and leadership are the three skill sets that I think people need to just focus on, regardless of your business, whether it's wholesaling, rehabbing, whatever the case. If you just focus on those three skill sets, and you touched on two of those, you're never going to starve, regardless of what happens to the market. And maybe at some point we'll touch on that. But dude, $400,000 to $500,000 between 2021 and now 2022, 401, about to cross over 500. What roles do you now, like, what are the hats that you wear? What are the roles in your business? Because I can already hear some people listening to this. Well, yeah, but now what if I don't want to go meet with sellers and be on the phone processing leads? And like, how do you ultimately simplify the business to generate more money and work less time, if that's what people are after?
Well, I think that that's one of the reasons people get into scaling, and is they get away from wanting to work. And there's not, I understand people wanting to pull back, but in my opinion, there's just no such thing. Like, if you're going to have a business, then you work. If you want to not have a business, then like go back to work and, who knows, find something else to do. But if you're going to have a business, you got to understand there's going to be work involved. So to try to have this absentee ownership, or you're just going to manage it from home while your team does everything, I have yet to see one of those work out. So I don't mind putting the work in because I know what I want out of it. And, you can also kind of look at it like this, wholesaling, flipping, that's just the front part. The end part is building the wealth to where, 10, 20 years from now, you don't have to do the work anymore. Like, your investments are working on your behalf, that kind of stuff. So for me, it's just, I don't try to get away from that stuff anymore, and I did. And that's why my business eventually, kind of blew up. Is I tried to hire somebody to handle every single part of it, rather than simplifying it to where I could handle a couple parts and somebody else could handle a couple parts. So for me, I think you're asking that. So I handle the acquisitions. So I handle the sales, sales appointments, and I handle the general contracting or hiring the general contractor. So basically, I'm kind of in charge of the rehab and the acquisition, and my assistant handles basically everything admin. Okay. So everything in the office and outside on the field.
Got it. And just for perspective, what's the split between wholesale, rehab for you these days?
We are very high wholesale now. I think part of that was the market. Our wholesales, and part of it was intentional, I guess, but our wholesales jumped up to, we're just over $20,000 per wholesale now. I think about 21.
Which is great, because you're in a Midwest market, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. Great. Okay.
So part of that was just firing most of my buyers. I think I might have only shown a couple houses this year. So now we sell all the houses sight unseen. There's no inspections. There's no showing. There's no time involved. So my time into a deal is going and meeting with the seller, doing the paperwork, and I'm done. And so my time into each deal is literally 30 minutes at best.
Interesting. Elaborate a little bit on firing your buyers, because I don't think I've ever heard that put quite that way.
Yeah. So I started having buyers that were picky, that started negotiating everything. And I didn't want to work with that. I didn't want to be constantly going between buyers and, trying to get the highest offer. I didn't want buyers trying to negotiate with me on every single deal and trying to constantly knock the deal down, just stuff like that. So I decided to be like, you know what, if you're causing me stress, and I look at this like in every part of my life, if you're going to cause me stress, you're going to find your way out of my life, whether you're a buyer or not. So I just started focusing on this buyers that were the least stressed, the quickest to act, and willing to pay what I was asking. And if they gave me that, then more deals went their way. And so the next thing you know, I had a very small VIP list of buyers, and that all my deals went there.
Brother, that's huge right there, what you shared, because some people listening might think that's counterintuitive, like you're sort of shooting yourself in the foot. And I think people are unwilling to detach from things that generate revenue, even though it causes a very high headache factor or stress factor for them. Right. And what I love about what you shared is that you said, dude, I need to remove friction, stress, headaches. And I think some level of stress is good, right? That's how we grow, but not unwanted stress, like people that are constantly trying to beat you up or squeeze you, or they want you to show a house or this and that. So the takeaway that I would encourage you listening is dissect your business and figure out what are the pain points, figure out, hey, what are the things that if I had a magic wand, I would no longer have to do or deal with. And then in some cases, it might just be making a decision to fire somebody. I'm not talking just internal, but just external, the people that you work with. Just decide that you're no longer going to work with them. And my guess, Mark, is that you didn't say this, but my guess is that the buyers that you really didn't want to work with, you're no longer working with, or they conform to your rules and are now basically honoring like your boundaries, correct?
We're just not working together. Like,
there you go. Okay. Yeah. Well, either way you win, right? One of the two there.
I think that one thing that needs to be said is that no matter what it is that we're doing, there should be an avatar that's part of it. So, I've got a buyer avatar, I've got a property type of avatar. So whatever, if I'm wanting to sell to somebody, I want a certain type of person I'm going to sell to. I want to like who I work with. Mm-hmm. So if I constantly have friction with somebody I'm selling to, that's not going to be an enjoyable business.
Yeah.
So, if I get to sell deals to somebody, their wealth continues to grow in the process. Like, one, I'm happy for them. They're happy for me because I'm getting paid. Like, it's a good relationship.
Yep. I want to address the people that are thinking, well, I want a simple business, but I also want to make 7 figures, right? And so you've kind of outlined the formula for, you're making $500,000. You're taking that, that's your personal income, and you're doing it low stress, just one team member, and you putting in the work. And I appreciate you sharing that it's going to require work. For people out there listening that say, hey, I want to make 7 figures a year. Can I do that with a very, very small team and a simple business? To that, you say what?
I can't say much because I haven't done it, but yes, it's probably possible. It'll probably depend on your market and the spreads that you're able to make in your market. There's some markets where I'd say, yeah, that's probably going to be pretty easy. It can be done from wholesaling, making $1 million a year from a person or two, probably going to be pretty hard. Flipping, yeah, that can probably be done. Probably going to have a couple more people included to make that model work. But yeah, I think it's doable. It's not something I can really speak on experience of.
Yeah, no. And I so appreciate the transparency. Again, you're a breath of fresh air in so many ways, in the way that you think, the way that you communicate, and just how honest and direct you are. And I know that people appreciate that. I want to transition on something you said. When people have asked me, Mark, Alex, what's one of the biggest mistakes you've made, or what's one of the biggest learning lessons? Well, for me, I spent a good 13, 14 years in this business, generating a lot of cash, making a lot of money wholesaling. Mm-hmm. And I remember at one point looking around and saying, where's the cash flow? Where are the assets? Yeah. Right. I just got used to wholesaling and just popping off $20,000, $30,000 deals. Yep. But I wasn't very, very wise about taking that money. And I wasn't living a crazy lifestyle or anything, but I was enjoying life. And I wish I would have gone back. One of the biggest lessons was take that cash and put it into assets that produce cash flow and ultimately make you wealthy long term. Right. What's been your strategy from a wealth building perspective?
Such a good question. It can go so deep once we get into the subject. I would say the first thing was managing my expenses, right? Like, probably like you, even though I was making good money and I wasn't living an elaborate lifestyle, but it was still just getting blown. And because I wasn't managing the expenses. So I had the exact same thing happen. I can tell you several stories hold this example. But I was coming to that realization that, man, I've made hundreds of thousands, maybe I've made $1 million at this point within a few years. Where is it at? There's times where literally, this is several years ago, thankfully, but I would go out to a restaurant and my card would be declined. And here I was just cashing a $30,000 check 2 weeks ago. And so, but thankfully that happened because it put me on a journey, not only to care about my income, but it made me very focused, laser focused, because this is probably my passion more than anything, is understanding wealth. Like, how does wealth happen? And I started researching like different opportunities and, retirement funds and like all this different stuff. And what I came to understand is that the wealthy are disciplined. They have a discipline that the average person doesn't have. So it took me quite a while to learn that. But the wealthy are just disciplined with their money. So rather than, they still spend, right? But they spend based off percentages. Yeah. So they first focused on becoming debt-free personally. So that was like, once I realized that, there's no reason for you to have a mortgage. There's no reason for you to have car payments. Like, get that stuff paid off, and then you should have so much money coming in. So for example, I don't know if you saw my post a few months ago, but I had paid off, went through a divorce, lost a ton of money, $500,000. And then within a couple of years, made it all back because this wonderful skill set that we have. And then bought my new house and paid for it in cash within 6 months. So back to debt free. And my expenses, I have a daughter that, she's in school. I have, all those same things everybody else has. My expenses are less than $1,600 a month. Wow. So when you have a $500,000 net income and expenses of under a couple $1,000s a month, yeah, there's so much money coming in to where if you can't get wealthy at that point, then you are truly just blowing it.
Yeah, you're significantly wealthier, to use that example, Mark, and to shine a spotlight on this for people that maybe that it just didn't resonate or it hit them. You said somehow, and we might be able to get into it because I'd be curious how you got your personal expenses under $1,600 a month. That's amazing. So kudos to you. $500,000 income. Think about the gap, the margin, and how wealthy you're. Wealthier than some people that I know that are making millions of dollars, but their expenses are so high that the gap is not as wide, if that makes sense. I'm having a hard time explaining.
No, I think I have a saying that says the wider the gap, or the bigger the gap, the faster the freedom, or the bigger the gap, the more the freedom. So creating that divide, creating that gap between your income and your expenses, that's investable income. And so when I look at the next 20, 30, 40 years and how much I'm able to invest per month now, I don't know if you want me to say, but it turns into many tens of millions, potentially hundreds of millions of dollars by just being consistent at that point. So I don't care about trying to make $1 million plus a year. That means nothing to me, because I know that over time, by staying consistent with this will inevitably turn into more wealth than I'll ever be able to spend.
How did you develop that mindset? I want to kind of like go deep here in your mindset and the process, because that's so contrary to a lot of people out there that are so focused on their personal income, making more money each year. And they're not putting as much emphasis, in my opinion, on building wealth over the long haul, right? Like everybody, we live in a microwave society. And I know that you subscribe to this as well. Like people live in a microwave society. They want things now, and they're not willing to sacrifice and just do things consistently over a long period of time to attain the results that they're after.
Right. I think I can say I'm grateful to have had a really, really good mentor in my life. He's in his 70s now. He's actually been my hard money lender since I started in business. And he has the same way of thinking as we do. So I've just been able to absorb that mindset over the last decade, over and over again, having these hour-long talks with him. And, thankfully I took on his philosophy and mindset more than I did some of these ambitious guys that are out in our industry that are, trying to make $100 million a year. Yeah. He's told me a lot of things. One, he's like, Mark, your energy is going to change over time. He's like, right. Of course, I was 30 something years old at the time. He said, by 40, your energy is going to be different. By 50, it's going to be a lot different. By 60, it's going to be a whole lot different. He's like, so you have to start focusing on owning assets more than earning income, because to earn income, you have to use energy. In order to have assets work on your behalf, you don't have to use any energy. So he said, your energy is going to change over time. First of all, know that. And then, another thing he said is, he's like, you get one life. He's like, do you want to spend all of it working and chasing money? And on top of that, so much of it's going to go to taxes. He's like, well, you don't pay taxes on wealth, you pay taxes on income. So understanding, like, he just helped with so many paradigm shifts of changing my mind to where my focus changed and my direction changed.
Yeah, sounds like a brilliant man, because that right there, like, we all know that, right? But it's put so simply and succinctly. You don't pay taxes on wealth, you pay taxes on income. Right. And I find that wholesaling and fix and flipping, it's a great business to generate a bunch of cash, but if that's all you do, you're playing the wrong game.
Yeah,
you're going to be taxed at the highest tax bracket, and it's going to be challenging for you to build wealth. As far as the actual wealth building strategy for you, has it been buy and hold rentals? What is it for you? And is it evolving, or are you going to continue down that path and just continue to build those and stack those assets?
Yeah. So I have a few different things. One, I have a life insurance, cash value life insurance policy. Right now it's at $4,000 a month. I put $4,000 a month into that, which that just over the last couple of years, I think I'm on year 4.
Is this infinite banking, by the way?
Yeah. Same thing. Yep.
Okay.
So because I've been stacking away money in that, I was able to pull out about half of my cash I had in there and use it to pay my house off. So, and now there's already, money getting piled up in there again. So that alone allows me to never, ever again in my life have to go to the bank for a loan, or have to get a car loan, or have to get a loan for my daughter to go to college, whatever. I get to take a loan out from myself and then make an interest on it. Yeah. So, like, if you could put a dollar figure on that, man, what would it be? I don't know. But just what that will turn into, right? So, once I'm done paying my wife alimony, like that'll go up a little bit. So then I'll knock it up to $5,000 a month, and I'm capping it. Like, I don't see the reason to put in more than that. But $5,000 over a 30-year period at 8%, I mean, you're talking $10 million. Yeah. So it's like, and that's just one little thing. It just goes into every month. I don't even think about it, aside from when I measure my net worth every single month. And at the end of the month, I pull up that statement, see what it is. I'm like, cool. All right. We're up another $4,000. So that's off to the side. And then, it's rental properties. So I really only aim to add maybe about 4 to 6 rentals per year. Okay. And I focus on nice, good quality homes, ideally that are going to attract good tenants in areas that are going to appreciate really well. So I'm looking for good quality homes.
So you're looking for like B neighborhoods, like the ugliest house in a B neighborhood?
Yeah, A and B. And I don't necessarily look for ugly homes, because sometimes it's just about buying them right. So I've got a couple houses I bought really well, just at the right price, but they needed $1,000 worth of work done, and I bought it 80% of value. So they're a $300,000 home. So yeah, houses like that, fantastic. So I've got the rentals off to the side. And then what I do is I never, ever touch the cash flow that the rentals produce. So I live off my earned income, and I kind of look at it like I always plan to earn to a certain degree, because I think that just keeps us in the mindset of producing, right? We want to be a producer. We don't want to be a consumer. So I always want to be producing and living off just a little bit. And I only pay myself a salary of about $5,000 a month. So pay myself a pretty small salary. But then the income that the rentals produce, I split that, and 25% goes into a maintenance reserve. So that way I'm never pulling from operations to try and fix up a rentals. I've always got that reserve that's able to kick that cash off. And then 75% goes into what's called a wealth building account. These are all just basic checking accounts, but they're all within the same bank. I've got them named, all that stuff. So that 75% goes into a wealth building account, and that is to be used for more investments. So whether it to be lend out money, whether it be buy another rental property, no matter what I want to put it in, but that cash flow turns around and adds more assets, that turns around and produces more cash flow, that adds more assets, so on and so on.
Exactly. You seem like a very disciplined, structured dude. Have you ever felt the shiny object syndrome when it comes to looking into a different asset class, whether it's commercial?
Every week.
Okay. And how do you fight against that? Because I feel like a lot of people, bounce from this to that and the other.
Yeah, I think I just weigh it out as far as, is it something that, one, I feel is going to be relatively or almost 100% risk-free. I don't like any risk into my investments at all. Testosterone does not have a place in my portfolio. So I take the risk out of it. Two, is it something that's not going to require too much of my time? And three, is it going to change, like my level of sanity? Am I going to be freaking out over this investment? If it's something I'm going to be concerned about at all, I don't want to do it. If it's something I can kind of, especially for the stuff I'm reinvesting, I want that to be much more set it and forget it type of investments.
Yeah.
So you've got like your portfolio, your rental properties, which are a little bit more active, passive. Mm-hmm. And then in my opinion, the cash flow that they produce should go into a very passive type of income, such as lending or something like that.
Got it. Last couple questions before we get you out of here, man. And again, I so appreciate you just sharing your wisdom and insight. I think it's going to have a big impact on a lot of people listening to this. Yeah. If you were going to rewind the clock, you're in your mid 40s, or almost. Rewind the clock, just about the time that you were getting started, 12, 13 years ago. If I had to pin you down and say, hey, one thing you wish you knew then that you feel can have an impact on the audience, to have an impact, like what's the one thing the 30, 31, 32-year-old Mark Lane wish he knew based on the experience and knowledge and expertise that you've accumulated in this business? I realize that's a tough question because you can go in so many different directions, but what would you say has had or would have the biggest impact on you and on the audience?
I feel like my life is evolving constantly. Every quarter, every year, it's evolving and changing and getting better, but I'm learning. And the stage I'm at right now is continuing to dive deeper on discipline. Discipline with my diet, discipline with my workouts, discipline with my wake up time, all that stuff. I think that focusing on discipline and living a disciplined life and living a whole life, but living meaning like very, like family and fitness and all that stuff, spirituality, all that. But focusing on discipline, because without it, the shiny object syndrome happens. You don't take care of your health. You don't focus on your relationships with your spouse. You spend more work time at work than you do with your kids. So having that discipline is going to allow you to conquer every area of your life. So it's going to allow you to be wealthier because you have discipline. You can't get wealthy without discipline. Right. It's going to allow you to get healthier because you have discipline. It's all encompassing.
Yeah.
But I would say that's probably the most life-changing thing is getting, and it's the same thing with work. Like if you are disciplined, you're gonna be able to just keep driving forward no matter what happens. Yeah.
So good, man. It's powerful. And I want to commend you, by the way. So guys, if you don't follow Mark Lane on Facebook, I just flashed it on the screen for those of you who are watching the video, facebook.com/Mark Lane Education. Great follow on Facebook. He has some very insightful posts. And every now and then you comment on something that goes against the grain, and I save it. I have folders for, I don't know, less than a handful of people that have insightful posts. And whether you know this or not, you're one of them. So
appreciate that.
Yeah, man, that's a testament to you because, again, I think our mindsets are so aligned. And every now and then I get a different shift in thinking based on something you or someone else shares. So you've had we're going to wrap up here in a minute, but you've had a complete body transformation from when I met you to now or recently. And a lot of that discipline, guys, that Mark is talking about, he not only lives it in his business and in his wealth building strategies, but also in fitness. And I would imagine your family, and you mentioned spirituality. So to me, that's happiness. When people look at the wheel of life, so many of us in our industry are so focused on money, career, finances, business, and everything else suffers. And I think one of the things I appreciate about you, not to say you're perfect, because none of us are, we all have challenges and make mistakes, but you're aware of it. And it sounds like you're working on these different aspects of your life. It's not just about business making money and accumulating wealth?
Yeah, well, I look at, I kind of do an evaluation every single year. In fact, it starts, and I already have my full year built out going into next year, and we're still a couple months ahead. So I usually do it kind of like October, November, when I'm really feeling like, one, I've probably already accomplished everything I wanted for the previous year. And then two, like, okay, where do I want to go for the next year? We're like, at the end of that year, what do I want my life to look like? What's going to make me say that was a phenomenal year? So I just kind of, then from there, then I make my goals and all that kind of stuff. But, I take an evaluation of my life, and if there's something that's suffering, that's where I'm going to give more attention. So this last year, of course, I was coming out of some issues that had happened in my family, but it was, I realized I needed to get more disciplined, just like I was just talking about. And so I made a goal to get into the single digits when it came to my body fat, not because I wanted to be super ripped. That wasn't really going to change my life at all, but I knew the discipline would drastically change my life. And so what I've learned and what I feel like I've become over the last 16 weeks during that transformation is enormous. Like, it's going to pay dividends in every area of my life going forward.
Yeah. Good for you. Yeah. Health, energy, vitality, and everything in between. So, brother, again, man, I want to acknowledge you for the discipline, for being an example for so many of us and being an inspiration in different ways. And it's been great to just kind of get to know you years ago and to see you kind of just reinvent your business, remake your body, and just in really the root of all this. I think what ties all this together is that word discipline. So I think that's a perfect way to end the show. But man, I'm glad we were finally able to make this happen. Appreciate you coming on and spending close to an hour with us here. Yeah. So guys, if you want to connect with Mark, facebook.com/Mark Lane Education. Are you up on that 5,000 friend limit, or do you have space for people?
Yeah, there's space. Yeah, okay. I was active with it for a while, then I took a while off. So it's, we don't really have all that big a following at this point.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, facebook.com/Mark Lane Education. And guys, I really want to encourage you, if you're not subscribed yet so that you're notified on Monday mornings when shows get released, please subscribe. And we have a library of 665 episodes at this point. So if you go to flipempire.com, use the search bar, you could pretty much put, I would imagine, many keywords in there that you're interested in. There's probably an episode or several on that. So thank you for supporting the show, and make sure to check out Mark on Facebook. So Mark, so appreciate you, man. I know you and I will stay in contact.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Great show.
Have a great one. One last thing before you go. If you have been listening to the show for a while and/or you have been getting value from the show, I would be 100% honored if you would share this show with a friend, or maybe share it with somebody that you think could benefit from this. It's my mission. It's my cause. It's my purpose through Flip Empire to impact and touch people's lives, to help people and in their businesses. So it would be an honor if you would be willing to share this episode. And one last thing, make sure that you're subscribed so that you get notified every Monday and Thursday when shows get released. I look forward to connecting with you on the next one. Until then, have a great day.